On Christmas Eve in my early 20s, my parents and grandmother were killed in a car accident on the way home from my brother's house. And there's something that my mother taught me that helped me navigate through that situation that a friend of mine told me I should share. So I wanted to share it with you guys today. So when I was young, I used to get very angry. I was a very, very emotional kid. I know, surprise if you know me now, but I used to be a very emotional kid, and I had a very hard time regulating or just letting go of my feelings about things, whether I was angry or sad or whatever it was. And my mother used to tell me, put a time limit on it, Devin, and when the time limit's up, then move on. And it sounds trite and kind of funny, but I mean, she would literally pull a timer out and she'd come and say, how long do you need? And I'd tell her, 30 minutes or an hour or whatever the time was. And she'd set the timer for me. And then when that timer went off, it was time to move on. It's time to let it go and go on about my day. And so when I got the call about my parents, I remember distinctly thinking that I don't want to be owned by this. It's part of why I don't talk about this very often, because I didn't want my story to be the guy whose parents were killed and how he got over the grief and all the other stuff. That's not the story that I wanted to have. I didn't want the story that says I don't celebrate Christmas anymore with my family because it's just too painful and Christmas forever is ruined and all of these other things that generally stem from traumatic incidences like this. I remember standing in my office when I got the call and thinking, that is not going to be my life. I refuse to allow this situation to steal my future from me. And so I put a time limit on it. Now, I was deeply blessed to have an inheritance from my parents. It wasn't a huge inheritance, but it was enough that honestly, I probably could have set myself up pretty well for the future. But I felt like in that moment, what I had just endured was so extraordinary that the most valuable thing that I could do was to give myself time to grieve. And so I took my entire inheritance and I took a year off. And that's literally what I did. I didn't work or do anything I didn't want to do for a year. My wife and I lived in Kansas City, and we literally just bummed around Kansas City. We went to movies. If I needed to cry all day one day, I'd just go lock myself up in the room and grieve. Whatever I needed to do, I gave myself room to grieve. But at the end of the year, when the timer went off, I packed everything up, I set everything aside, and that was it. I was done grieving. And that doesn't mean that there weren't moments later on in life where, when I had kids, I, had to take a moment to sit aside and process the fact that my parents wouldn't see my kids on this side of heaven. And I had to allow myself to process that grief with the Lord, because when you experience a tragedy like this, it doesn't just affect your immediate moment, but it also affects moments in the future. But the difference was, it wasn't a compounding grief. It wasn't that I had this deep moment of trauma that was then re-triggered by every single future moment that it touched. Instead, each new moment in the future became its own instance of grieving. And for each one of those, I set a timer for those too. Now, obviously, I didn't need to grieve for a year for the latter ones, but for each one, if I needed a day, if I needed a couple of weeks, if I needed a month, whatever it was, I took the time to grieve that thing, but I put a time limit on it. I said, again, I'm gonna set the timer. When it's done, it's done. And I give it to God and I move on. This, along with a multitude of other factors that kind of played into the situation that I'll share later on when I give my testimony at the end of this, middle of next month. Outside of those things, this one thing has been, I would say, integral in how I've been able to process a lot of the grief that I've experienced in my life through losing businesses, partnerships, losing my parents, losing babies to miscarriages, all the things that I've experienced. Setting a time limit, giving myself time to fully grieve the situation, but then giving it to God and letting it go has been, I think, one of the most powerful and healthy gifts that my mother gave to me. And I hope that it will help you as you're walking through all the inevitably difficult things that you'll face in your life. Because as Jesus said, in this life, there will be troubles. Not there might be, not there will be for some, but not for others. In this life, there will be troubles. But how we respond to those troubles dictates how long those troubles spend in our life. Some of us turn momentary hardships into months of destruction in our lives. And I know this because I used to be one of those people. So whatever you're dealing with, when it comes to its conclusion, when the end has been reached, set a timer, give yourself time to grieve, and when it's over, pack it up, give it to God, and move on.